Good Monday morning of the 31st week of the ordinary time of the year. It's right now it's Thursday in the real world, not in the video world. That is it's Thursday morning, and it dawned on me about 2 o'clock this morning that I hadn't done the videos, and I'm in a state of early panic. It's about 4:20 in the morning right now, and I'm going to be heading to church in an hour, less than an hour. But I thought I'd get started. You don't know. Oh, anyway, this is an interesting reading from the letter to the Romans, but I'd like to get one line, okay? Okay? It's from the letter to the Romans. He said, "Oh, the depths of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God! How inscrutable are his judgments and how unsearchable his ways. For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been his counselor, or who has given him anything that he may be repaid?" That's the line I like so much. "For from him and through him and for him are all things. To God be glory forever. Amen." That's letter to the Romans, okay? But the line, who has given him anything that he may be repaid? You know, if I'm being critical here, let me just, I'm critical of the past, okay? Of some of the pieties of the past. I'm going back to the 40s and the 50s, 80 years ago, 75, 80 years, because in our piety at that time, it strikes me, maybe it was just where I grew up, etc., but there was a kind of sense in which we were cutting deals with the Almighty. If we did X, we would get Y. And some of the saints seem to have indicated that, including in some ways our Blessed Mother, at least as it was piously presented, that if you did these things, you were guaranteed those things. It was a trade. It was a trade-off, okay? In a way, if I could use an expression, my father could get a little rough on this stuff, trying to buy paradise. Well, paradise is not for sale. Christ is not for sale, you see. That very interesting how religion can quickly descend really into bartering, into superstition, where we enter into contractual relationships with God so that God comes into our debt by what we do. If you say this, God has to give you that. See, I remember if you made 7 First Fridays, you were guaranteed paradise. I mentioned that before. You see? And I like to laugh about that. I love to kid about the kids of the old neighborhood. Fact is, none of this. This is fictitious in so many ways, but borderline. Good fiction is based upon reality. That's what makes it interesting. And I said the kids of the old neighborhood were made 7 First Good Fridays, never went back to church. Now, that's not true. But there is an element of it that is true. You would hear those kinds of remarks. You would hear these kinds of deals. And in some ways, they were taught to us by the preaching of the church, sometimes the sisters when they taught us Sunday school. But they were believing it too. It wasn't like they were foisting something on us. It was also part of the belief. Well, you can't buy paradise. We're not called to make a deal. We're called to worship and to love the God who created us and who redeemed us. That's the lesson I learned in the monastery. I really mean that. I owe my faith to my vocation, not the other way around. I think if I weren't a Passionist, I don't know what I would be as far as the faith is concerned. Because my confessors in the monastery, the preaching, the spirituality of the Passionists was to dwell on and focus on the infinite mercy of God, the infinite love of God. Not cutting deals, but the generosity of God witnessed on the cross. How can you fear a God who dies for you? I mean, you're called to love, not fear, you see. Not to cut deals with God, but to worship and love the God who redeemed you. And yes, I owe everything to the Passionists in that regard. My confessors, I must have been something to them in some ways because I was so scrupulous. I think of Father Simon Paul Wood. Well, he was brilliant. But what a great confessor. That was in the seminary, the first 2 years in the college seminary. So I went to confession to him every week, and I think he guided my soul into a reverence and a love for Christ as opposed to a fear. I think he had to work me out of the scrupulous pieties of the 50s that I inherited and I fostered. I was so scrupulous. I feared Christ. I feared God. But becoming a Passionist, I learned to love Christ, not fear him, and love the Father as I love my Father, because I began to understand and see that God was to me a father, Christ a brother, the way my Father was a father to me. See? And then I understood. I hope I've always preached a loving and a merciful God. I hope I have never, ever, ever tried to create fear in the heart of the believer. I mean that. I hope I have never done that. Because Christ is to be loved, not feared. If you fear anything, that you haven't loved him well enough, not because you're going to be punished by it, but because you haven't lived up to the love you should have had, you see. I know when I die, one of the things I think God will ask of me, and in this sense, have you loved the people in the world that I gave you? Did you love them well? Not that you kept your nose clean. Did you love the people? Did you love me well in the people I gave you to love? Friends, members of the order, whatever, whomever I gave you, did you love them well? Did you bring richness to their lives? See? Not that you kept your nose clean. Did you follow all the rules and all that? But did you love well? That's the New Testament. That's St. Paul. That's the Gospels. When does Christ ever you have people knuckling under to rules? He's just the opposite. He's just the opposite. He doesn't call us to obedience to rules, but in a sense, an obedience to love. That's not even a good expression. What I mean by that is he calls us to be good lovers, to look out for those he has given us, to be faithful to those whom God in his generosity has made part of our lives. I think of my family. Here today happens to be All Souls Day that I'm making this video. I think of all those people who have been part of my life, and I remember them with love and gratitude. Love and gratitude to them and to them in and for and through Christ. They are the church Christ gave me, my family, my friends, the people that I have loved and been loved by. And I pray and I hope only that I have loved them well. And then when I die and I find and I come into the company of the people of my life, they will say, Ted, Raymond, you loved us well. Not perfectly, but you loved us well. Welcome to paradise. I mean that. To me, that's what we're called to. Not to make deals with God. There's no way to make a deal, nor should we. Any more than you make a deal with the people you love. Rather, you ask yourself, have I loved them well? Please, God, help me love you well in loving those whom you have given me well, so that when we die, we come together as a community of love. And we can say to each other, you have loved us well. We have loved each other well.